Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Hannah, and I work with the Livable Communities team, and I manage the LCDA program. And this year, I also am going to be running the TOD program, and I use she, her pronouns. We are going to be talking about the LCDA and TOD development grant opportunities that are opening up soon. As I mentioned, this session is being recorded, and we are going to post the recording to our website so you can refer back to that. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. Like I said, I'm going to be checking back in with the chat as we go. And we also have a question and answer time at the end. So today's webinar is going to cover all of the essential information and technical details for the 2024 LCDA and TOD development grant programs. We're going to share an overview of our program goals, recent changes to the program from the last few years, details like key dates, scoring, and eligible activities. I'll go through some examples of past projects, and at the end, summarize resources that are available to applicants, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So the goals for LCDA and TOD are very similar. The shared goals are to maximize connections, create more housing choice in the project area, minimize impacts on climate change, and support a more equitable region. TOD does place more of an emphasis on dense development that will increase transit ridership. While compact and connected development is important in LCDA, there isn't that same emphasis on transit and increasing transit ridership. And before we go into talking about eligible cities, I just want to make a quick note of who can apply and who can receive funds if you are awarded a grant. So only participating cities, counties, or development authorities like HRAs or EDAs can apply to LCA. Developers or community partners collaborate on the application, so it's a partnership between the government entity and the development team. But the developer or community partner cannot submit the application. And if you are awarded a grant, the funds go to that government partner, not directly to the developer. So in order to participate in LCA, cities need to be part of the local housing incentives program and establish goals for affordable and life cycle housing. Right now, we have 77 cities participating across the 7-county region. LCA runs on a 10-year re-enrollment cycle, but cities can elect to participate at any point. So if there are cities on the call who are interested in participating, or if you are a developer working on a project in a city that isn't currently participating, please let me know. I'm happy to talk with you about getting enrolled in the program. Some additional requirements that we have: cities applying for projects that involve housing must have adopted a fair housing policy in order to receive the grant funds. You can apply without a fair housing policy and be awarded funds, but you won't be able to receive those funds until the policy is adopted. And we do have a lot of resources on our website to help cities get a fair housing policy set up. TOD eligible areas are located throughout the region's transit network and are eligible to cities that elect to meet LCA requirements, which again, that's the participation in the local housing incentives program and establishing those goals for affordable and life cycle housing. You can find out if your project is in an eligible TOD area by going to our website and clicking on Make a Map. And it's there on the front page of the TOD program. You just enter your address, make sure that the TOD grant layer is checked, and that will let you know if your project is in an eligible TOD area. So going over some changes that we've made for the 2024 year, the biggest change that we've made to the programs this year is in the scoring process. So previously, the applications went through a 2-step scoring process. Applications needed to meet a minimum score in step 1 and a minimum equity score in order to be eligible for that next round of review. This year, all of the applications are going to be reviewed by a panel of both internal and internal council staff and external reviewers. There is still a minimum overall score and a minimum equity score that you need to meet in order to be eligible for funding, but there isn't that process of advancing into the second round of review. We're hoping that this will cut off about a month of the review time, so those funding decisions will get out to project teams sooner. The second change that we have to the programs is the consolidation of the teams and the process sections. Looking back through application answers and scores, there was a lot of overlap between those two categories. And in this new combined section, we're looking at how the community the project is intending to serve is being represented in your decision making, which includes both community engagement and your project team. We're still looking at the steps that the cities are taking to address disparities and support more equitable development. And that's also rolled into this larger category of the combination of teams and process. So for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account, LCDA, the program has $9.8 million of funding available to award this year. If eligible applications from suburban communities request more than 60% of available funds, no more than 40% of the funds that we have can be awarded to Minneapolis and St. Paul. So that means that this year there's just over 5.8 million available to suburban projects and just over 3.9 million available to projects that are located in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The TOD program has 5.5 million available to award, and in TOD, rather than having that geographic split, there is a $2 million limit per city. So projects that are eligible to apply for TOD need to be located in a TOD area. And again, you can check our Make a Map, enter the address, and make sure that your project is located in an eligible TOD area. Each applicant can submit up to 3 applications in each program, and you do need to decide if you're applying to LCDA or to TOD. You can't apply to both of the programs in the same year. The applications for both of the programs will be open July 15th, and applications are due August 12th. Funding recommendations we expect to go to Council in late October with a final vote in mid-November. Any activities that you start before the awards are recommended are not eligible for funding, with the exception of site acquisition. So just keep this in mind as you're planning your project timelines. For site acquisition, we can support purchases that were made up to 12 months prior to the application date. The grant terms are 3 years, which means that all of your awarded activities need to be finished within 3 years of the award being approved. If you need to, we can grant up to a 2-year extension on your existing grant. Just make sure that you let us know as soon as you can, and we'll go through the steps to request an extension. So how does LCA work? The city, county, or development authority is the applicant, and our grant agreement is between the city and the council. So for ease of explanation, I'm just going to be saying the city instead of listing out all of the government authorities, but it can be county, HRA, EDA, Port Authority. So the city will apply in partnership with the development team. Developers can't apply directly to LCA programs. Most cities do set up a separate subrecipient contract with the development team since our official agreement is with the city. We do recommend that you have that subrecipient agreement in place between the development team and the city. So I mentioned earlier that each city can only sponsor 3 applications in each program. And because Minneapolis and St. Paul have so much interest, they each have a pre-application process to select the projects that they're going to submit to us. And the pre-application has closed for both of those cities. So the timeline for Minneapolis and St. Paul is a little bit earlier in getting that pre-application in. So moving into scoring, you'll notice that our scoring has an emphasis on equitable development and includes an equity criterion in each scoring category. LCA is focused on addressing racial inequity in the region, given that race is the largest predictor of inequitable outcomes in jobs, housing, and other LCA goals. For both of the LCDA and TOD programs, projects that are addressing racial equity will be prioritized in our scoring. Projects that are addressing other inequities will earn points towards how you're addressing those inequities, but won't be able to receive full points unless there's also a consideration of the intersection of racial equity. There are explicit equity criteria noted in the scoring tables for both programs. So as you're looking through the scoring tables, you'll see an asterisk next to a given criterion. That means that is counts towards your minimum equity score. The LCDA and TOD programs follow the same scoring structure. For each of the sections, we strongly recommend that you look at the evaluation explanations for each program. And towards the end, I can drop links in the chat to the things that I'm mentioning on our website. These explanations give you a little bit more information on exactly how we're going to review your application. So this includes questions that reviewers ask themselves and examples of how to achieve points. The first scoring section is the what, or the project outcomes. And in this section, we're looking at how well your project is addressing program goals that we talked about earlier. We're scoring you on housing, economic opportunity, compact and connected development, and environment and livability. This category is looking at what your project is and what you are trying to achieve through the project. So for example, deeper levels of affordability, inclusion of workforce development programs, focus on environmental justice, and introducing complementary uses into the project area are all examples of how projects could achieve points in that section. In the TOD program, the compact development section has an additional emphasis on connection to transit and an increase in potential ridership. So the second section that projects will be scored on is the how, and this is the newly combined process and team section. So this used to be broken out into how and who, now it's just the how. And in this section, we are assessing how the community the project is intending to serve is being represented in your decision-making process. So for example, this could include your community engagement process, how much influence that process had on your project, if members of your project team are from the area where the project is being developed, or partnerships that you have developed as part of the project process. The evaluation explanations has a list of more examples of how you can achieve points in this section. And in this section, we are also looking at what steps the city is taking to address local inequities. So this could include doing a study to understand disparities in homeownership, having an equity-focused review process, or participating in GARE. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about eligible activities. And in your application, you'll list out what specific activities you would like to fund using the grant money. There is a complete list of eligible and ineligible activities on the website and in our Program Essentials document. In general, development grants support the more tangible construction-related phases of your project. We can support things like stormwater management systems, district-wide energy systems, public space and public art, pedestrian improvements, community engagement, and design fees. In the past couple of years, we've also made general construction available for affordable housing and projects and economic opportunity projects that meet our program goals of wealth building and increased economic stability for communities of historic wealth extraction. If you have any questions about eligibility, if an activity that you want to include is eligible, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am happy to talk through that with you before you apply. As I mentioned earlier, with the exception of acquisition, we can't pay for any work that was done before the grant was awarded. So the grants are dispersed on a reimbursement basis. And if you are awarded a grant, we'll go over all of the grant administration steps in more detail when your grant agreement is sent out. And you'll also receive an offer to have an orientation with your project team. So site acquisition, holding costs, general construction, and preservation and rehab are eligible activities that are limited to projects with affordable housing or economic opportunity projects. And just a note that for affordable housing, we consider it to be affordable if it is 60% AMI or less for at least 15 years for rental and 80% AMI or below for ownership. If you're interested in applying with any of these uses in your project budget or you have questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out. Getting into web grants. So web grants is the online application and grants management program that the council uses. So this is what you will use to submit your application. If you are awarded a grant, this is also how you're going to be submitting status reports and payment requests. So when you log in, you can either go to My Applications or Funding Opportunities. Personally, I've found that web grants tends to have fewer issues if you go in through Funding Opportunities rather than My Applications. Seems to be a little bit faster. So when you go into Funding Opportunities, you will see all of the open funding opportunities available through the council. You'll select either LCDA or TOD. And the city staff person, that is the primary contact for the grant, will start the new application. To help with collaboration, we will have a Word document of the application available on our website. That'll be open, or that'll be available the same day that applications and web grants open on July 15th. So once again, city staff need to start the application and then add collaborators. If you have never had a web grants account before, or if you don't have access to the email address that's connected with your web grants account, you'll need to make a new account. And for city staff, if you could please send me a list of everyone who you know will be collaborating on an application before anyone on the project team registers, that's really helpful in making the process go a little bit more smoothly. I do need to verify with city staff who is working on the application. So again, it just speeds the whole process up if I have that list ahead of time. We just do this to make sure that applications being started are going to be supported by the city, and also to make sure that everyone is working in the same application and we don't have duplicate applications started for the same project. If you register for an account but I haven't gotten confirmation that you'll be working on an application with the city, I'll just ask you to have the city project manager email me to confirm that you are working on an application. So again, it just makes this process a lot faster and easier if we have that list ahead of time. One place that we get a lot of questions with web grants is in adding collaborators to the application and web grants. So once I have the list of everyone who's working with the city on an application, I go in and link those users to the city. And once a user is linked to the city staff person will be able to add their name from a drop-down list in the general information section of the application. The drop-down menu will have a list of everyone who is linked to that city. So you'll just need to click on their name and then save that. So you can see a screenshot here of what that will look like, and you'll go into that additional grantee contacts in the general information section. I see that we have a couple of questions in the chat. I was just checking in on the chat, so I am going to take a second to answer those. And just for the recording, I'm going to read out your question and then read the answer. So rental must be affordable for 15 years. Is there any time-based requirement for ownership activities? We don't have a specific time-based requirement for ownership, but the length of affordability for ownership is going to be considered in the scoring. So if it's a situation where it's like a 99-year lease, that's a project that would get preference over affordable ownership that doesn't have any kind of time bounds on the affordability period. On the 60% rental and 80% owner AMI is the average over the whole development. That's a great question. So when we're looking at something like income averaging, as long as the entire development is affordable at 60% for rental, 80% ownership, we do look at the average across the development. And then I have a request here to re-show slide 16. So yes, we will re-show slide 16. And if there are any specific questions about the information on slide 16, I am happy to answer. I'll just leave this here for a second. And this, again, the recording will be available, and we'll also post a PDF of the presentation, so you can review that later. All right, so now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the administration process. These are incredibly competitive grants. It's been getting more competitive every year. So not everyone will be awarded a grant, but if you are awarded, this is the process that you'll go through post-award. So again, grant activities can't start before the award is made, with the exception of site acquisition. This is a pretty high-level overview, so I'm not going to go into too many details now. But just to know that in general, the grant cannot pay for work that was started before the award was made. So grants are made for specific activities as a reimbursement for work done rather than in a lump sum to the project at the beginning. After the city has signed the grant agreement contract, the development team can start submitting payment requests to the city. The city then sends the request for payment along with documentation to our grants administration team. And it's very important that you have documentation along with your request. And after awards are made, our grant administrator will have an orientation with project teams who are being awarded grants that year, and we'll go over exactly what kind of documentation you'll need to submit. So our grants admin team then reviews the request, they send the payment to the city, and the city can then pass that payment along to the project team to reimburse for specific activities. So when you apply, you'll list out the specific things that you're asking for funding for. And I'm just going to check back in on the chat here. Okay. No new questions. So application resources. We have a lot of different resources that are available to support you as you complete your application. All of the resources are available on our website, either as a PDF or in the website body itself. On the program pages, we have all of the key information about the programs, like scoring and eligible activities. We also have a frequently asked questions section and recordings of past technical assistance sessions. Those past sessions are topic focused and might help you better understand how your project can meet LCA goals. The recordings are from sessions held in 2021, but the information is still very relevant to the scoring criteria that we have today. We also have a document called Program Essentials that you can download. That's one of the PDF options. It has the key dates, the funding amounts, the eligible activities, and the scoring criteria. This is really helpful to keep handy just as a quick guide to refer back to. And again, I want to draw a special attention to the evaluation explanations. In my opinion, I think these are the most helpful resources that we have in helping you to better understand how we're going to review your application. We also have a project data profile tool that is going to be mentioned in a few of your application questions. Excuse me. This tool gives you a variety of information from our equity considerations data set about the census tract where your project is located. So some of those questions will specifically recommend that you consult the project profile tool to help shape your answer. This is also something that you can use for other grants that you're applying to or any work that you're doing. So please feel free to use this tool in any way that might be helpful for you. And finally, we have 2 resource libraries available with additional resources. The application library on the apply page of our website has sample resolutions and sample fair housing policies. We also have a web grants tips section and tips to help other project teams work together. And these tips for project teams were created from having conversations with successful project teams. And on our resource library, we have a collection of resources on topics related to LCA goals like sustainability, equitable development, and transportation design. So those resources are helpful in as you're thinking about shaping your project. I am also available as a resource for you as you think about if it's a good fit, if you want to apply, or even when you're working on the application. Please do not hesitate to send me an email, or you can just go ahead and schedule a meeting with me using the booking links that's on our website. It's also in my email signature. That automatically adds a meeting to my calendar, and it will send you a calendar invitation. I would much rather you reach out and email me 5 or 6 times a day than feel like you're lost in completing the application. I can't tell you what to write, but I can talk through the scoring with you. I can go over in more detail what you're looking for and where your project best aligns. So I strongly recommend making an appointment to talk through your project and the application, even if you feel like you don't have specific questions. Email is definitely the best way to get in touch with me, and especially while applications are open, I generally try to answer emails back within just a couple of hours. All right, so now I'm going to go over a few past successful applications and talk a little bit about what made them successful. So this is an affordable housing project that was designed to serve families who have had recent child protection interactions, have been unhoused, or are experiencing housing instability. The goal of the project is to provide stable housing along with supportive services like education and job training. The project includes several family-sized units that are below 30% AMI. And a few things stood out about this project during the review process. Most of the units in the project were below 30% AMI, and 7 of those units had 3 or 4 bedrooms at 30% AMI, which is not something that we see too often. In addition to the deeply affordable units, the project team was really thoughtful in providing services in the building that would help support families in finding more stability. The engagement process, which was led by Juxtaposition Arts, which is a local youth arts organization, included families in the neighborhood who had experienced housing instability, as well as service providers to provide recommendations on building design and programming. The project team was really intentional about bringing in partners who had experience working with a targeted population and who had lived expertise in the things that they were addressing. So the deep affordability and the intention in project design are 2 things that really made this project stand out. So to highlight an example of a non-housing project, we have the 30,000 Feet project. This is an arts and tech center that's led by the Black Arts and Tech Group 30,000 Feet. The center will provide training and internships for youth, primarily youth of color. The project team will hire instructors of color to prepare youth for careers in the arts and technology. This is an example of a project that's focused on workforce development and job creation in an area of higher unemployment and for residents who are more likely to experience economic disparities. The project team thought about how to physically and programmatically connect the center to a nearby high school to help reduce barriers to participation for local youth. The team putting the project together had experience in working with youth of color, particularly Black youth, through their previous programming. This gave them more insight into how best meet the needs of youth that were participating in their programs. So this is an example with more of a TOD perspective. This is the Opportunity site in Brooklyn Center. This is an initial development that will begin a larger effort to transform the city's 80-acre Opportunity site. It was formerly a large hub of now abandoned big box stores, and the city led an engagement process to create a new vision for the site and to better reflect its changing communities and priorities. The result here was a goal of a new modern downtown for the city. This project was awarded TOD funds, and the portion of the project included an event center, a 24-hour childcare, and an academic learning center in one building, and 60 units of deeply affordable housing with family-sized units in a second building. And a few things also stood out about this project in the review process. There's deep involvement of the city and how the project fit into a larger system plan and community-informed vision for the area. The vision was for dense, walkable, and affordable development that would serve community needs and connect to opportunities across the region. There was a mix of uses that contributed to needs that were identified by the community, like commercial uses that provide services, businesses that offer living wage job opportunities, and housing with a range of affordability levels and units that serve families. All right, so I have some general tips for successful projects. A big one is tell the story of your project. So this is something that I've taken from another grant program, but overall, one thing that we're looking for is why this project now, and why are you the right team to be doing this project? Think about how you convey that, how you talk about your connection to the project and the project area, and what goals you're trying to accomplish with this project. The next tip is to talk with program staff before you submit an application. Again, even if you feel like you don't have specific questions, I think it's really helpful to talk over your project, talk about how it aligns with goals, and we can talk through how competitive your project might be. I will never say, yes, your project will definitely get funded. No, your project definitely will not get funded. But it can be helpful to talk through areas where your project might struggle a little bit and areas where your project might be more competitive. And the third tip is to review evaluation explanations. Do a self-score and just see how you think your project would do. And as you go through, pay attention to the examples of how you can achieve points. Those are going to be really helpful in thinking about what to highlight in your application and how to talk about your project. So I'm going to get now into the question and answer portion. I'm going to go over some questions that we tend to get fairly often as more questions might be percolating in your brains, and I'll leave time again for Q&A with everyone on the call. So what attachments are required? So we require a resolution of support, the grant requested activities plan, site plan, context map, some kind of perspective image, and the make a map from the website. Stormwater management, site acquisition, and community engagement have additional attachments. So for all of these, we'll be looking for stormwater management, we'll be looking at your stormwater management plan. For site acquisition, we're going to be looking at an appraisal or a broker statement, just to ensure the price is a fair market value. And then community engagement. This can be answered in the application body itself, but we'll be looking for what your community engagement plan is and how you plan to continue that throughout the project. All applications are limited to 10 pages. If the documents are longer than 10 pages, either take a relevant excerpt, have an executive summary, something like that. If the application is, or if the attachments are longer than 10 pages, we'll ask you to remove them from your application, add a new attachment that is 10 pages or less. So we often get a question of how do you score on the budget items in the application? We don't score on the budget. We don't score on what is requested. We're scoring on what your project is going to be. So the amount of money that you request, what you request it for, does not have any impact on your application score or the likelihood that your application will get funded. How do we choose which applications to fund? So we score the applications And then we allocate funding based on project score until we hit the city limit, the geographic limit, or we run out of funding. So there will be projects, usually there are projects that get partial awards when we've hit that limit for city, for geography, or if we've run out of funding for that round. And finally, another question that we get a lot is, should I apply to LCDA or to TOD? So you can apply to either. Projects in TOD areas can still apply to the LCDA program. TOD does have more points for density, walkability, station area activity, and connection and complementary uses. So as you're thinking about your project, think about how you are intentionally focusing on connection to transit, increased transit ridership, density, complementary uses. If you have any questions about whether or not you should apply to LCDA or TOD, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to talk through that with you. All right, that is everything that I have prepared for you today. And I'm going to leave some time now to answer any questions that folks might have.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Marie Franchette from St. Paul. So if we apply for a project for TOD funding for, say, X use, then if you apply to LCDA, is that supposed to be for a different use then? So you're not applying to both for the same use. Would that be correct?
So as a project, the project as a whole, you'll need to decide if you want to apply to TOD or to LCDA. You can't apply to both in the same year for the same project, regardless of the uses that you're asking for funding for. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Right. Okay, we have a question here. Can cities structure the funding and subrecipient agreements to be in the form of a forgivable loan that reimburses expenditures of the developer like an escrow? That's a great question. So for projects that have LIHTC funding, we can structure the grant as a loan. When it gets into the specific details of how that should be structured, that's something that I can connect you with our grants administration team on how they look at the documentation for that. But for projects that include LIHTC, the project or the grant can be offered as a loan. We have another question here. Is there a list of eligible construction costs if the funds are used for general construction? No, we don't have a specific list of eligible construction costs. We just kind of look at construction costs as a whole. So anything that's contributing towards general construction. All right, well, if folks think of any other questions, again, please do not hesitate to reach out. I really do mean that I would rather have you emailing me 5 times a day than feeling like you're lost in the application process or feel like you can't ask a question. So you can send me an email, you can use that booking links and just put time directly on my calendar. I am available for you to help support you through this application process. So again, don't hesitate to reach out. This webinar will be recorded, added to the website. So if you want to refer back to that, you can. And we'll also put a PDF of the slides up on the website as well. But thank you all for joining today. I appreciate it. And again, any questions that come up, please don't hesitate to send me an email. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your day.